I had put a draft to the, or a link to the draft implementation report. You'll have that. I'm going to go ahead and share, or actually, I always jump into this too fast. Because this is the first time this particular committee has met, I wonder if you would like to take some time to choose a chair or co-chairs for this committee.
Are you thinking, Rowan, by a chair by the committee topic, like since they rotate, or like the committee in general, like each week, chairing each week?
That's a really good point. I think just the committee in general. I don't know if there's anybody who's, and you don't have to choose a co-chair if you, or a chair if you don't want to. That's entirely up to you. But yeah, that's a really good point, Kevin, because it is different topics. I don't know if there's anybody who would be able to be here every week for the next 8 weeks. No, okay. Are you okay going forward without, and this is, so you just put a thumbs up, but are you okay going forward without a chair?
Sounds okay to me.
Okay, all right. Okay, thanks. All right, well, with that resolved, I'm going to go ahead and share screen and just get into the draft. What I did was, and hang on, let me get into it. There we go. Okay. So there's actually quite a bit to this document, but where I thought we would start, since this is today's topic, is with the preparing your campus for the sexual misconduct survey. And again, this is on Basecamp in that link that is in the chat. So if anyone would like to access that and make notes on it for themselves, that would be great. Again, just remember, please, when you are editing something, upload it to Basecamp. And with your comments and things like that, and then we can consider those comments during our discussions. So for the preparing your campus, there are 3 things that I thought were really important. There may be more, but I started off with 3. One is developing the implementation team. So who on their campus is going to be responsible for getting all of the work done. The second is doing a resource audit so that they can identify the existing programming that might be on campus. Do they have prevention programming? Who do students go to when they need support? In addition to the Title IX coordinators, so do they have counselors? Do they have advocates? Those sorts of folks. And then who in their local community is able to provide resources for students? For example, where would a student go to get a forensic examination if they wanted one? Who might a student contact if they wanted to get off-campus counseling about sexual misconduct that they had experienced? The reason that this is important, I think, is not necessarily for the survey itself, but we want them to prepare a list of resources that they can offer students with the survey. That serves a couple of functions. One, it makes sure that if students complete the survey and need resources, they've got access to them, but it's also kind of a educational thing. And then the third area that I thought was important that I haven't worked on yet is the campus messaging and survey communication. So what's the process on their campus for having messaging approved? They need to know that. Who's going to be responsible for putting it through that? I believe this would be a task of the implementation team, but maybe not. I think most cases it would be. And who are they going to be messaging to? And then what's the best way to get those messages out to their different audiences? So just that basic kind of stuff. So I think one of the other areas that I didn't really focus on, and I'm not sure if anyone wants to talk about that, is we have another topic that's specifically for data handling. So I assume that there might be people from an IRB or from research as part of this implementation survey team, but I didn't really think that that would be necessarily the appropriate for this section of the implementation report. Are there other things that I'm missing that we should add to this?
This is really awesome, Rowan. Thank you for working on this.
Thank you, Andrew. If folks are interested in Basecamp, I've been uploading the references that I've been using for this. So there are quite a few. In addition to the existing state reports, there's Illinois, Nevada, Massachusetts. There are a couple of other documents that have been pretty helpful. Of course, Willamette has done a survey, and so they've got some implementation information, PSU. So if you go to Basecamp implementation committees and then resources, everybody should be able to see that if you wanted to do some of the background reading on your own. So as usual, when we're trying to do like a group review and group edit of a document, there's a lot that needs to be done. I'm wondering if anyone has any suggestions for how to do this. What I can do is make sure that you've got the most recent document in Basecamp. If you have a bit of time to review it, make some comments or things that we could talk about at the meetings, that might be the best use of our time if folks are able to do that. Does that sound good to people?
Yeah, I think when the writing subcommittee working on the draft, the way like we utilize Basecamp and the like review function in Word, it worked pretty well. So I think folks can probably use the same way to like, if they want to add anything or they have any question to the current document, they can just use the review and then upload their reviewed version of it and everybody can see it.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so we can just chat real quick. So we've got those three areas, the preparing the implementation team. So if you get a chance to take a look at that, especially if your campus has people that you think should be included or you're aware of like categories of people that should be included on the implementation team that I didn't put in, that would be really helpful. I think the one thing that I didn't really talk about was who's going to be in charge of their implementation team, right? Like there needs to be somebody who leads that. And I think on most campuses, that would probably be the Title IX coordinator, just because that's the person. Would it make sense to you all to recommend that the Title IX coordinator be the person who forms the implementation team?
Yes, I just had that discussion with my provost, and she wanted to know who was going to be the head of this because right now we're trying to see, because a lot of students are over surveyed. So we're trying to put together a survey calendar so that we don't overwhelm the students. So certain surveys like state, federal are the ones that will get priority versus others. So I told her, hey, remember we have this one coming up in September. And she's like, okay, well, who's going to be in charge? Because she was asking if I'm going to be in charge of it. And I said, no, I think I just upload the data and that's it. And I think the Title IX, but I'm not sure because I'm not on the implementation team. So that's the last thing I told her last week.
Okay. Okay.
I have one gut check, which I'm sure many other folks here are having, which are, of course, our lovely friends at smaller schools and the Title IX coordinators that are already wearing 25 hats. Just to kind of process out loud, of course, like they are the most important role to be looped into this on a campus. And at the same time, their most important priority should be serving constituents, right? So I wonder if, like, first option, yes, Title IX coordinators, of course. And here are specific recommendations for like a co-chair, if you will, or two assistants or whatever. So that way the Title IX coordinator can continue to serve survivors, which, as we all agree, is their number one priority. And the survey can also continue to be done. Just to again say out loud, like, I don't want to create any opportunities where Title IX coordinators are not kept in the loop on this, where of course they should be. But at the same time, just thinking about capacity, and it will also be the red zone. So curious if folks have any thoughts on who maybe like the co-captains, if you will, could maybe be that we could recommend.
Andrew, I will jump in too. I really appreciate what you said. One of the things along those similar lines I was thinking about was some of the benefits of like maybe recommending a list of like, please consider the following positions as folks that could lead or co-lead this, would be including deans, student affairs folks. One of the things I think about often at PCC is that what are the strategic ways we get more people involved in this conversation? And I assume that this is something that could be common at other institutions as well, that it can sometimes be siloed into Title IX when we know that we want other entities on a campus to be really, really involved. So I think that maybe, because on some campuses, it might not be the Title IX coordinator just because of dynamics. So maybe it's an opportunity to say, we recommend people in the following positions as having strengths to lead or co-lead this, instead of even highlighting Title IX as the first go, because that might also be an excuse to be like, no, you should just do this, because they say you should be the one when they don't have the capacity, as you were saying, Andrew, or other dynamics. So just an idea. I'd love to see some student affairs executive deans in there. And Adele, I'll just uplift what you said, DEI folks as well, absolutely.
Yeah. I've got staff from student life programs, but I didn't put in deans or student affairs leaders. And I'll add that.
Yeah, I just want to again uplift what you said, Caroline, about like thinking about how we can, I don't know, like broaden the radio waves that this conversation takes up, right? And not just keeping it in the singular Title IX, Office of Institutional Equity, those types of things. I love the thought of making a very specific recommendation of, pick a dean that's excited about this and have them own this project, right? Like that builds so many new bridges in exciting ways. And we're not just overloading these incredibly passionate and often overworked Title IX coordinators.
I like the idea of maybe a co-lead instead of one particular person with this. And I do believe on the committee, the IR office should be there if they have an IR office, as someone who actually will, I guess, however we're going to get the data back or present the data or however we're going to upload the data, I don't know, but I would think the data handling would be IR, but actually reaching out to students and organizing it should be maybe a co-league or something like that with either DEI or, I don't know, Title IX or whomever. I like the idea of deans and other people. The more people involved is great. It would be great.
I would add that I do like the idea of maybe this is not only just Title IX coordinator's duty to do the survey. As a student, I would probably have the concern that if it is only managed by a Title IX coordinator, student would feel confused about what's the difference between making a report compared to fill out the survey. And it could be frustrating if someone like mistakenly thought that I'm making a report and the school is going to do something about what I've experienced after filling out the very long survey and then just hear nothing from the Title IX coordinator. I feel like that might be another thing that we want to avoid by like adding more people into it and make sure it's clear that this is like completely anonymous. It is for collecting data on your experience, not for reporting. And I would say another thing is that I don't know other colleges, but I read there's this pretty strong antagonism between student body and admin. Anything distributed by the several admin people that's kind of not so popular among students would be just kind of like disregard immediately. So I would recommend that someone who's actually like, like that students like to talk to, that student trust handling this survey would I can see significantly increase people's willingness to actually fill it out. I think at my school, maybe the people handling DEI have better reputation and are like more popular among students. And that I think that even though I don't know like how experienced they are with regard to like handling like data about sexual misconduct, but with regard to like making students feel that like filling out a survey would actually like contribute to like the campus in a good way instead of just filling out survey and hear nothing from the admin, or even admin utilizing the data to do things that they don't want they don't want to see happening. Yeah, in summary, maybe someone who's actually trusted and liked by students culturing this would be great.
I think you mentioned that too, Rowan, about people not trusting Title IX coordinators or something like that. I just remember you saying that in a conversation before. I don't know if everyone has this. We have on our campus what's called an Abbey House. It's a Center for Equity and Gender Justice. And it's a place where students can get their basic needs met, and food pantry, and there's counselors, and you can talk to people about whatever you have going on. I know that Abbey House is very central for helping out students. I don't know whether should should we contact people to ask them what they have on campus, or is that just too much of a work or too much of an ask, and or we should just generalize, just say, hey, these are general roles that we think are filled on campus, and just choose between those. I don't know.
Adea, I think you bring up like a great point that I think is a much bigger conversation, right? Which is like a big part of how the law was designed, I think, was to not be prescriptive and to be as flexible for the U of O's and the community colleges, right? And so I wonder then if thinking about this like multidisciplinary survey implementation team, this is much more of like a narrative, like you, the individual reading this, knows your campus better than those of us in this subcommittee meeting right now. Here's what we're thinking about. Here are offices that students typically feel comfortable with. But again, you know that better than we do. Here are some considerations with working with a Title IX office. It's going to be the red zone. They're going to be busy. However, they're really tapped in. Working with Deans is great because they have everybody's email addresses and phone numbers. However, there may be dynamics there, right? So sorry to maybe derail or zoom out a little bit, but I wonder if that kind of accomplishes all of the different ideas we have swimming around right now.
So I think that I tried to write the document with these are suggestions and recommendations, and making it really clear that you're going to choose the people on your campus that make the most sense for you. Not every campus has undergraduates and orientation periods. Some colleges have really intense orientation weeks and freshmen coming in. Other campuses, not so much. So residential campuses are going to have really different kinds of resources available than community colleges might. Adea, you mentioned Abby's House. That's a Western Oregon University specific thing, but a lot of campuses do have formal or informal food pantries. I am wary of using DEI in this document just because we don't know what's going to happen at the federal level. And they've already, like last week, they promised to send, I don't know, troops after governors and people who are implementing DEI. So who knows what's really going to happen, right? But I think if we talk about student affairs staff who serve or groups of students on campus or something like that, just trying to avoid that DEI, I think is really important in this particular political climate. Not that any of us, I mean, all of us understand how important that is. I think too, Andrew, I really appreciate what you said about Title IX coordinators, and Belle, I really appreciate what you said too. And I think it's really important to recognize on some campuses, Title IX coordinators do see their primary job as providing resources for students. On other campuses, Title IX coordinators see their primary job as ensuring that their campus is in compliance with regulations. And those are two very different kinds of goals. So I think that might contribute to who students trust on campus. One of the things that we'll talk about in probably, I don't know if we'll talk about it in the data handling or the survey administration, is who is going to have access to this data. Because even though it's anonymous and we make it really clear throughout, you are not, nobody's collecting your name here, this is all anonymous, students are still going to be really suspicious on some campuses about how their data is going to be used. And I think that there's one of the guides that I was looking at talked about, I love this term, honest broker. An honest broker is a person who is not the Title IX coordinator, is not someone who necessarily has is in the dean's office or something like that. Someone who doesn't have authority over students. And remember, Title IX coordinators and deans are incredibly helpful people, but they also have authority over students, and students aren't always going to be trusting in those situations. So that idea of who is our honest broker, is that someone, the IRB office, a lot of campuses will have they're not their IRB offices, but they will have a research office on campus that manages the student data. And those might be the people who collect the data, but they're also going to then have to do the reporting. So each campus is going to have to figure out who that is for their campus. Yeah, exactly, Rudy Ann, exactly. Talking about that stuff without using those words. It's really, really helpful. Just to be clear too, we're going to recommend that they have a 2-year window. So they're going to get the survey in September, and then they've got 2 years after that to implement the survey. So we don't want them implementing it in September. We want them to take the time and do the planning, right? I'm assuming that most places are going to need about 6 months to do the planning with the amount of work that needs to be done. I think we're also probably going to have a recommendation that they not administer the survey until after their spring break, because that way you've got, for people who are just entering into the institution, you've got almost a full academic year of data to collect. Most places who do surveys will administer it after spring break. So they won't have, nobody will be, when they'll be looking at this document, they'll be reading it, talking about it on campus. How are we going to implement this? And then spending the next 6 months or so figuring out their plan before they even are ready to do the survey. And they may not be ready in the spring of 2026. They can wait until the spring of 2027. They don't have to do it this year. So the being careful, thinking about, making suggestions about the campus politics, that's one important reason that I think like the thing that's not negotiable is you have to have students involved in this planning process, right? They have to be on the implementation team because they're going to know who on campus is trusted. And they're also going to know the best ways to get communications out to students. So, I mean, I've been out of Reed for what, 2 years now? And I have absolutely like Belle at Reed, what are students using to communicate with each other? How are they communicating with each other these days?
They use Discord.
Okay.
We obviously we don't use Facebook anymore. Instagram is just for showing your party life, and when students actually talk to each other, it's always on Discord about campus politics. Yeah.
Okay. So that's at Reed, and then Melanie, what are they using over on your campus?
Sorry, I was trying, I couldn't, anyways. I think Discord, like I've heard in general at most campuses, and I've been to like 3, 4 different schools in my college journey so far, so all in a row, and Discord seems like a major one used. There's, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I don't know anything about Discord. Like I'm old, like I stopped like learning new social media about 2 years ago. I hit like 60 and I'm like, okay, I don't have to keep up anymore. I'll just ask the young folks what they're doing, right? But on Discord, is it like Facebook or Instagram where the college can put a post, or do the students who are in the Discord groups have to make the posts?
I don't think Reed College has any like official account on Discord, even though I remember when I was a freshman, I was invited into a Reed class of 2025 huge group that basically included most of the students in my class. That doesn't seem like anything initiated by the admin at Reed. It just seems like just like it's a very heavily student autonomy space, and I think that's the reason why people actually talk about campus politics there, because like nobody from the dean is monitoring this channel anyway. It's initially built for gamers to communicate with each other when they play games. And but nowadays it's more like just an online place. People don't feel like they will be scrutinized. It is highly anonymous, even though like if you actually go into like the Read community Discord, like spend enough time, and you can realize, okay, this person is that person in real life, but for most of the time it's completely anonymous. If you don't want to reveal your real name, you never need to do that, and people have no problem with it at all. So could be a good platform to distribute it, to be honest. Don't really know how the admin is gonna do that, given that they probably also don't know how to use Discord at all.
Yeah, it's just basic. I think someone just said, I think Andrew said it's just like a group chat where you're invited into it, or either they approve you to be invited into the chat. So, and you just amass a lot of people, because I used to do that when I was in some things. So, yeah.
Yeah. So then that kind of reiterates that the importance of having students from different groups involved, because if you're going to spread your messaging out through something like Discord, those students have to be in those communities, right? I know that what I was hearing from students, and again, I've been out of it for a while, was that they were not reading the emails that they were getting from admin. Okay. So
that is true. That is
right?
true.
So we
That is
always
true.
think that we're communicating with them because we sent her the email and we blasted the whole community, right? But on some campuses, I'm sure that students do read their emails, and I'm sure there are some students who read every single email that comes from admin, and there's a bunch that just ignore them or delete them as soon as they get them. So thinking about those communication channels, those are going to be really campus specific, right? Like Caroline, are folks at PCC using Discord, or do you? Yeah, okay. So yeah. And is WhatsApp like not being used anymore at all? No, okay.
I never met anybody on campus using WhatsApp. That's gonna be a weird thing to ask. Do you have WhatsApp?
They do at PCC, but it depends on, right? We have a different age group at PCC, like average age is 26, I think. So we have so depends on the generation, but yeah, we have students still using WhatsApp.
See, that local knowledge is going to be so critical for their survey implementation teams. Yeah. So.
So perhaps just giving that, like this as an example, would be useful information, right? To say, you know, at some universities or at some campuses, Signal is used, at others, Discord is used, at others, whatever, WhatsApp is used. Who knows, somebody's still using Facebook. And then just let them sort it out from there so that we're not being like overly prescriptive.
Yeah.
And should we give like the reasons why we suggest some things like you need to have students involved and need to have administrators, some administrators shouldn't lead because da 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 da. Should we give the reason why so that they can understand the recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, what I like say to my state teams all the time when they're building their coalitions to pass a bill is like, think about the people that you will have recurring questions to, make sure they're on your coalition. And I wonder if that's all we have to say, right? Is like, who are the people that you know you're going to be calling and emailing more than twice a week? They need to be involved in this one way or another.
Yeah, and I think we also want to really stress that they need to have, if they do have advocates available to them as resources, that they need to involve them. Because what I've heard from advocates on campuses is that a lot of times they're left out of these discussions entirely. And I think one of the reasons for that might be because advocates are one-way channels. Like they get information, but they don't give you information back. And it's hard sometimes for some of the administrators on campus not to take that personally. You don't trust me because you're not telling me anything about the students. No, I don't trust you because legally I'm not allowed to share anything. But yeah, so, but yeah, I really like that idea of giving examples. And I think the thing too, right? So that's how students are getting information, might be Discord, but then you also need to give information to faculty and staff, right? So how are your faculty and staff communicating with each other? Are your parents a group that you want to give information? Are you on a campus where there's a lot of parental involvement? PCC, probably not quite as much, right? But maybe read more so. The parents might have more questions. So how are you going to do messaging to these groups? So I think that, again, that's going to be really specific. Yeah. Bill, I'd be fine with that if you want to share that. I don't know how other folks are seeing it. Do we want to, Martina, that's such a good point. Athletics, Greek life, that kind of thing. Yeah, I always forget about Greek life. I'm going to add that as examples.
I don't want to cut this conversation or discussion. Like I feel like we should be like thoroughly discuss this topic, and then I can share my screen. But once like people feel like, okay, we can wrap it up, I can share my screen with folks. I have a rough like sheet of how we want the universities to report the data to us.
Yeah. I love that, and I'm happy to do that. I just wanted to bring up one more thing because I don't know how to approach this. I think that some of our campuses are going to probably contract with third parties to implement the surveys. I haven't heard that yet, but I have a feeling that that's probably going to be something that places like Grand River are going to offer to help out with, right? Because so we might want to think about the importance of, if you all feel like that's something that might happen, and I don't know, those of you who are on campuses, if you have a better idea, if you think that the college or university might want to outsource the survey. I feel like it's worth bringing. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would just remember one time when we outsourced a survey, it was because the survey asked for a lot of personal information. And there was a lot of distrust on campus. And we thought them thinking a third party would collect the data, not only collect the data, but would analyze it and summarize the data and then give it back to us without any identification and any kind of just very anonymous. And our response rate went up when that happened. So maybe offering that as a suggestion, uh, but that's going to increase cost when that happens. So I don't know whether they'll actually do it, but I do know that for one particular survey that we did that, which helped our response rate.
I think one concern I would have if college outsourced this is that how are they gonna maintain the confidentiality of the data if it's like a company doing that? Does that company have to be compliant, like follow the rules of IRB? If they don't, then like there's basically no consequence for them to like leak the data to someone who should not see it. And I also feel a little more concerned. I know I did mention that that could possibly increase the rate of response, but on the other hand, would students trust a company that they probably never heard of before, or even like heard some bad things about before, if the survey is from them, or if they know that the survey will be handled by them instead of somebody in the school that they already know, or instead of like states, like someone from the state or from the government.
I know when we did it, the email came from us and we had to go through the IRB process and everything had to be, I mean, student information wasn't sent out to them. So some parts of student information, maybe the IP or something like that, was sent, but I don't think their name, student level, or anything other identifying information was sent. But the whole IRB process, we had to submit that in coordination with them, and they had to describe how they were going to use the data and the process. And I remember when the email went out, I think at that time, the DEI, I know we're not going to mention DEI, but the person who was over the DEI slash, we didn't have at that time, we didn't have a separate DEI office. We had international office slash DEI. The then head of that was the one that sent it out, the email out. And I think we did a follow-up email. IR did a follow-up email. And actually our response rate was great because we explained why it wasn't handled on campus, and explained what they were going to do with the data, how it was going to be handled. And we explained and answered all those questions. But I don't know who's going to use that option. That was the option because we had people who didn't trust a lot of people that worked on campus. So that was the reason why we did it.
I'll say that any institution that was going to engage a third-party vendor to administer the survey would have a very carefully crafted contract that would ensure that the vendor had to abide by all of the same rules that they did, because otherwise you could just like loophole around any IRB requirements by always just hiring somebody outside. You can't do that. And so there would be a very carefully crafted contract that had many people from each contracting office and the GC's office carefully ensuring that there was security and that it met all those standards. So I don't think we would need to necessarily worry about dictating the terms of those sorts of contracts, because that is so above our pay grade, that's so outside of our purview. But it would be for sure that there would be the same kind of requirements, in the same way that they essentially are contracting with the survey platforms, right? They're buying a subscription to Qualtrics or whatever, and that's creating a contract. They still have to follow all the same rules. So I don't think we necessarily have to worry too much about that like particular element. Though perhaps we could have some instructions that if you're going to hire an outside firm to do this, ensure that the communication with students explains that all those same things are going to be held. So so that even somebody who doesn't spend a lot of time thinking about university contracts knows that.
If I could just add to that experience we recently had, because working with an outside vendor who emailed our students directly, our students thought, like a huge number of our students thought it was phishing. So that is just, I don't know if this is worthwhile to add into the instructions. I just wanted to flag it since we're having the conversation, is that, as Martina, you just said, the instructions that if you're doing an outside vendor, you got to make sure that you're communicating with your students so they know what to expect. We communicated, but we only communicated once. That was our mistake. We needed to communicate many more times, because a lot of folks were flooded with concerns about these being phishing emails.
Yeah, and our emails were sent internally, but the website they were referred to go take the survey was the external vendor. So, so they didn't communicate with our students directly.
Rudy Ann, go ahead.
Thanks, Rowan, and thanks everybody for this this discussion. I'm really appreciating it. I just feel compelled to share, though, I guess in a good way, going back to diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, that there are a lot of colleagues of mine and nationally that are still very much leaning into the work, and they're not just stopping utilizing the words. It's being more about being strategic on how we protect the work, right? As opposed to censoring what we can or can't say. The universities, all 24, the public institutions, I get an opportunity to meet with their DEI officers, their VPs, and there are only 2 regionally, because of where they're at, where they've just have had to update their titles because they were antiquated, and that to better represent the work that they're doing. And even then, the word equity is still embedded within that. The other thing we have in our favor, even though there's threat to federal monies, is that the the Association for DEI professionals in higher ed has, along with other national university advocates, have already submitted lawsuits against several of the executive orders that have come out, basically stating that much of it is illegal. I am not a lawyer to speak to such things other than what I've been told by lawyers in process. So all that to say, I just want us to stay courageous in protecting the work, but know that we're not alone in still being able to talk about equity and do the work to support our students and their families. So just know that is the case as of now. We have a courageous example from the executive director of the Oregon Department of Education that recently sent off a letter with full support of the governor to hold the line, because K-12 was threatened to remove monies from Title I schools, from just a lot of stuff. And so we're just moving forward in the work, even though we know in some cases there's definitely been monies that have been frozen for certain programs and whatnot. So I just, it's a mixed bag of stuff, and everyday things change, but just know that folks are just really leaning into the work to support everybody else.
That makes me really happy to hear. I'm sure it's really encouraging for a lot of us. Thank you, Rudy.
It's been an interesting few weeks for me, especially because my title explicitly is diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So and others and my team, and definitely the foolishness has increased, but we're okay and we're pushing forward.
The foolishness has increased. That's like, you should be in your signature or something on your emails, but yeah, I really like that. Okay. So
I
yes.
just want to jump
ahead.
in really quick on this third party thing. I just have a really strong feeling that the students who wrote this bill would not be happy about that idea. A really, really, really key component of why we created this task force, and not just the task force, but the survey, is to create this infrastructure at the campus level. That is, at least for us at Every Voice, the root of this issue is that campuses, regardless of size or budget size, all lack the infrastructure to adequately address this issue. And a core component of that is opening doors to conversations with people that have not had those conversations before. And so obviously, like, not to be prescriptive, again, schools have their own limitations, but I think it might be wise for us to really think about, again, the purpose of this collaboration and how we're creating infrastructure that does not exist. I'm always a journey, not the destination kind of guy, and I think we should really think about that as we're creating this.
Thank you, Andrew. I agree. There's some unintended consequences, like the elimination of undergraduate advocates, that I don't think the students who wrote this legislation would be happy with. I guess my concern is that we are going to see colleges and universities who are experiencing, serious budget concerns. Their priorities may not actually be supporting survivors. We're trying to get that back on their agenda. And that's one reason why I think getting this information out is so critical. I think we probably should mention third parties and make it really clear that having a third party administer it does not exempt you from the work of planning the implementation, right? That has to be direct campus. You can't outsource the entire planning of the survey. So I think in our recommendations, we can make that really clear. These are not yet rules. The rules will be based off of these recommendations. So that's something to keep in mind too as we're doing this. What do we think needs to be codified in the Oregon administrative rules? And maybe part of it, Andrew, to your point, is saying that you cannot completely outsource the survey, that you still need that local engagement and information.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that makes complete sense, because I'm just putting myself in the shoes of someone who has never done this before, and they just get our giant packets of how-tos, right? And how stressful that's got to be. And at the same time, like, wanting to preserve the entirety of it. So I love the idea of, like, yes, you can phone a friend if need be. However, these are the must-dos at a campus level, whether that's 3 people that meet once a month to talk about the survey, right? Yeah.
I just had that moment that I always have during these meetings where I'm like, this is such a rich conversation. I'm just enjoying this so much. So thank you all for that. We have about 10 minutes left, and I wonder if so Kevin, can you remind us what topic we're talking about next week?
I think it's survey
administration.
Survey administration. Okay, perfect. So that really ties into this. So if you can't be here every week, please go ahead and put your comments into the document. So download the document, put your comments and edits in, upload the document. We can't make decisions outside of the meetings. We have to make the decisions within the meetings, but we will review the document and the comments at every meeting, even if the topic is something different. So if you've got things that you want to make sure that we talk about, or points that you want to make sure are written into this document, please go ahead and do that. We'll come back to them. Okay. And then I want to offer, if folks are needing to take off, but I'd love to see, Belle, the draft summary sheet that you've got. And if folks are feeling like we're ready to maybe shift over to that, or is there something else somebody wanted to bring up real quick? Okay, Belle.
All right. Thank you. Thank you guys very much for staying here. I will be quick. It's not a very long document. select Chrome share. Okay, can you guys see it? Okay. So it's a very rough draft that I wrote yesterday based on the Massachusetts Survey Analysis Information Guide and the New Hampshire Implementation Guide. So I basically wrote out all the information that I currently think we want to collect. So first, the overall survey response metrics. We want to know the total number of students who started it, who completed it, the survey completion rate, and the response count and percentage for each questions based on the total number of survey participants. And we also need a lot of demographic data reporting, which refers to all the questions we ask in the section 1 of the survey, basically count and percentage for each answer. And this is a really good note that I found from the Massachusetts Information Guide to protect people who have very unique or not very common demographic category on campus. They recommend that if there are fewer than 10 responses, then only report as less than 10 to maintain the confidentiality. If there's none, then just report 0. And also this is another thing that we probably want to do to make sure that the sample we got are not very biased. Here's an example of how to compare the survey participants to the broader population on campus. Obviously, we need to revise them based on the demographic questions that we asked. And with regard to the summary format by question type, we have a lot of Likert skill questions from strongly agree to strongly disagree, of course, count and percentage. And for multiple choice, I'm not pretty sure whether all of our answers are set up as a way that people can choose more than one answer. If yes, then the total number of selecting each option can actually exceed the total respondent. And of course, we need percentage. And for the date-based response, I'm not super sure about how to let them report that. We can group by semester year and count the percentage and the do the content percentage. But I remember Rowan also mentioned that it might be really useful for us to know the exact date, whether it's orientation week, whether it's during a big campus-wide party, whether it's when the Greek life got really vivid and crazy. But I am also hesitant to put it that way because obviously it would be more complicated to let them report exact date, because a lot of participants would only report months. And then if we want to map them all to the activity that are happening on campus, it would be another huge labor for the people administrating the data, the survey, and for us to figure that out. So I was wondering, just with regard to the summary that we collect from campus, whether it would make more sense if we just do the semester year. And for the people who are actually analyzing the data, they would have better idea of what kind of activity was going on, whether orientation week is the week or the months that people suffer more from sexual misconduct on campus. And for text entry, just either content percentage of each unique responses or group them together when it makes sense. And for numeric input, we can just do the total number of responses for each individual value. For example, age, 18, 19, 20, 21, and then count the percentage of it. And we probably still want to collect information about non-substantive responses. I know we give options for people to choose these 3 for almost all the questions. And I think it might still be valuable for us to know how many people just don't really know how to answer this or prefer not to answer this. And that's it. That's basically what I got so far. And I'll definitely upload this to the Basecamp so people can review and leave comments on it. Yeah, and I think next meeting will be the very last one that I can make and maybe talk more about this sheet.
Belle, that is fantastic. Thank you so much for doing that. And those are really good points. The date one is really interesting. And I think the reason that we did it by month year is because asking specific events, O Week, homecoming, or whatever, would get kind of complicated and cumbersome. But if you've got month, you could say, okay, well, it happened, most of them happened in September. That was our orientation in the beginning of semester. Or a lot of them happened in November. That's when we have that one big student party that everybody goes to. So I think that's sort of why we did that. But this is incredibly helpful.
Sorry, so maybe it would make more sense if it's grouped by month instead of by semester.
I think so. And then we can ask them in the analysis, there could be a narrative section if they want to talk about that. I think the other thing to remember is there's two things that are going to happen here. One is they're going to report, everybody's going to report the same information, right? They have to report the same information, but each campus is going to have a whole bunch of information that they're not reporting that they can then use to improve their prevention and response. And when we talk about data handling and analysis, I think we want to make that really clear. So yeah, this is great. Now that you've mentioned that, we've got 3 minutes left. I just want to give folks a heads up. I'll talk about this again next week. I'm not going to be here on the 19th because Belle is graduating and a whole bunch of other students at Reed are graduating, and I've been invited to go and watch them walk, which, yeah, I know, right? Like I love you guys, but so I won't be here on the 19th. I think you are more than capable of handling a meeting without me. But if you wanted to think about not meeting on the 19th, remembering that the 26th is also, we won't have a meeting because that'll be Memorial Day. And then I'm actually out the next 2 Mondays. So yeah, but we'll need to think about that. So you may have, you're going to have to probably meet without me a few times. That's what I wanted to let you know. Okay. Yeah. And congratulations to everyone graduating. Okay, great. All right. But I will definitely, hopefully I will be here next Monday and hope to see some of you then too. And then don't forget, later this week, we have the, next week, sorry, we have the final survey review meeting is going to be, I didn't write the date down. I think it's next Friday, a week from Friday.
16th.
Thank you. The 16th. So yeah. So that's
Congratulations, Belle, for graduating. I wish you well. On the 19th, I'm going to be at a conference. So I'll be in Florida the whole week up until Florida and a little bit of Georgia from the 19th through Memorial Day.
Great. Okay, folks. All right. Oh, we finished up by noon. Yay. Okay, great. Thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it.